There is a mistaken idea at large in the modern world, and it's this: that science is the only route to true knowledge. If a thing cannot be scientifically proven, then we cannot know that it is true. Such is the belief of scientism. And I deliberately called it a belief because the basis of scientism cannot actually be scientifically proven itself. It's an article of faith, and therefore it disproves itself. Now, however useful science may be in many walks of life, it is no substitute for credible eyewitness evidence. That's what Paul presents to us in respect of the resurrection in today's reading from 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 7 to 11. After that he was seen of James, then of all the apostles. Last of all he was seen of me also, as of one born out of due time. For I am the least of the apostles, and am not meet to be called an apostle, because I persecuted the church of God. But by the grace of God I am what I am, and his grace which was bestowed upon me was not in vain, but I laboured more abundantly than they all, yet not I, but the grace of God which was with me. Therefore, whether it were I or they, so we preach, and so ye believed. When someone is telling you about an unlikely event and the response to your cross-examination is something like, "I know what I'm talking about, do you not trust me?" Rather than providing supporting evidence, you can be pretty sure that you have every reason to doubt what they say. If a person doesn't want their claims to be open to scrutiny, it's probably because they cannot withstand scrutiny. So it is all the more significant that Paul actually puts forward eyewitness evidence for the resurrection of the Lord Jesus Christ. The testimony of many eyewitnesses who were, at that point of time, available for cross-examination. Paul writes, "The greater part remain until this present," in verse 6. But how credible are these witnesses? It is interesting that the Gospels seem to record 11 appearings of the resurrected Christ, but Paul only refers to 6 of them in this passage. So we might ask the question, why these particular 6? Now, as we read last week, Paul puts forward Cephas, that is Peter's Hebrew name, the 12, and above 500 brethren at once in verses 5 and 6. This is quantitative evidence. The number of people who saw the resurrected Christ. There was an individual, that is Peter, then a group, the band of followers who were with Jesus throughout his earthly ministry, and then a huge crowd of people exceeding 500. This was not an isolated event seen by one person only. Now, in the verses that we've read today, Paul refers to James, all the apostles, and me also in verses 7 and 8. This is qualitative evidence. The qualitative evidence of different kinds of people. In the case of James, the half-brother of the Lord Jesus, it was the witness of a man who was up to that point an unbeliever. 6 months before the resurrection we read, "For neither did his brethren believe in him," John chapter 7 verse 5. In the case of the apostles, it was the witness of people who were fearful skeptics. Repeatedly, we read that when the woman reported the resurrection, initially they, that is the disciples, believed them not. Luke chapter 24, verse 11. And in the case of Paul, we have the testimony of one who had been, until his conversion, a vigorous opponent of the believers. "I persecuted the church of God," he writes in verse 9. Now, in mentioning James and himself, Paul is bringing to bear the evidence of what we call hostile witnesses, those who had been opponents of the Lord Jesus and not easily influenced by made-up stories. Now, Paul concludes these verses by referring to his own status as the least of the apostles in verse 9. He had a real sense of unworthiness, that he should have been called to such a ministry given his checkered history with the Christians. However, the point that he leaves them with is that the gospel that he preached, and they believed, so we preach, and so you believed, in verse 11, was the gospel of all the apostles, and therefore a resurrection gospel that he, that is Christ, rose from the dead, verse 12. Now, in the following verses, he will tell us just how important that fact is.